Hi everyone, welcome to our talk. Today, we will be talking about Data Manager, no-code self-service ingestion for Apache Pinot. My name is Tim Santos, and I'm a software engineer at StarTree. I work on Data Manager and Pinot ingestion. One interesting fact about me is that I love to dance, and I used to dance and compete on a team here in the Bay Area. Today, I'm joined by Oren.
Hey everybody, I'm Oren Panitch. I'm a user experience developer here at StarTree, and I work primarily on the Data Manager application. An interesting fact about myself, I'm a bit of a motorhead, love driving cars around the test tracks, and when I go on vacation, I try to find a hot rod to tool around it. All right, I'll see you guys in a little bit when I walk us through the user experience of the Data Manager application.
See you then. To give an overview of what we will be talking today, we will first talk about the current Pinot table creation process, how it is today. Next, we will discuss why you should use Data Manager and how it is useful. And finally, we'll end with a demo with Oren. So the traditional Pinot table creation process usually consists of 3 steps. First, you define your schema. Then you define your table configuration. Then you will use REST APIs or the Pinot admin scripts to upload your table and schema. Then you'll start ingestion. When you define your schema, you will define your dimensions and your metrics, the various Pinot data types, as well as the time format. While creating your schema, you typically need to cross-reference your input data, and you need to make sure that your types and names are defined correctly. This is okay if you have a few dimensions or if you have a few metrics, but imagine if you had 100 of those, then that could be quite cumbersome. Next, you would define your table config. There are many things that you can configure. You can configure your indexing strategy, your ingestion, your Pinot tenants, your routing, your segments, and much, much more. This is great as it provides maximum flexibility, but on the other hand, a lot of things could go wrong. You could have an invalid schema, wrong credentials, incorrect types or format. You can have some syntax errors, or maybe just some incompatible configuration. This process works for the experienced Pinot user who can navigate the process over time, but it can be intimidating for the first-time user. It also takes some going through documentation to find the correct examples. And as you can see here in this image, the process of troubleshooting data can be cyclical. First, you start off with defining your schema, you define your table config, you start ingestion, and then you discover some error. Then you repeat the process until you get the data ingestion correct. This can be time-consuming and can be a developer productivity hit. Based on prior experience, it's been known to take Pinot users several days just to get their ingestion working properly. Now, we will introduce Data Manager, StarTree's solution to making Pinot data ingestion easy and simple. I'll now pass it on to Oren to demonstrate how easy it is to ingest data into Pinot using Data Manager.
All right, thank you, Tim. I'm going to walk us through real quick how to quickly ingest a data set. Here in Data Manager, we pre-configure all deployments with a couple demo data sets, and so you can quickly go through and test it out yourself. So we have applied a S3 demo data source. We've chosen our input path and format, and then we've inferred our schema. Quickly have pre-inferred our config as well. We have our review and submit step already, where we review all of those details, hit submit, and we've already created our first data set. We get our ingestion status as well, and then we'll go over to the Pinot UI and check that we've ingested our data properly. So real quick, let me find this data set. And here it is. And here we are. Pinot has already ingested our data from a batch data source. That's it for me. Tim is going to come back and continue to show the benefits of using Data Manager to ingest your data.
Thanks, Oren. We will now go further into why Data Manager is useful for any Pinot user. First, Data Manager has an intuitive user experience that can guide even the first user of Pinot. Second, it's a game changer for data modeling. It reduces the time you need to spend in that troubleshooting cycle. Third, Data Manager makes it easy to ingest data from wherever it resides. And fourth, it provides metrics and diagnostics once data starts ingesting into Pinot. Data Manager has a prescriptive user flow that can guide a user that has no prior knowledge of Pinot. In fact, most Pinot concepts are abstracted away. Data Manager has a built-in schema and table configuration validation, and the UI will also help avoid any syntax or semantic errors. The data modeling component of Data Manager is a game-changing feature, and we like to think this is where the magic happens. In Data Manager, we try to infer as much as possible to avoid having you to manually define your schema or table configuration. And this will reduce a lot of errors and will save you time. So on the left, you can see some sample rows of data to be ingested into Pinot. And then on the right is the schema automatically generated using Data Manager. Let's dive deeper into the inferred schema. As highlighted here, the Pinot data type is correctly inferred. We do this by using the input data schema, like in Avro for instance, or we can infer it from sample records, like what we do with CSV formats. The time column is a first-class citizen in Pinot, as it is with other time series data stores. In Data Manager, we can detect your time column and determine the time format, which can usually be tedious and easily misconfigured. Ingestion transformations are also supported in Data Manager. In this example, the column names contain spaces, which is not supported in Pinot. So in Data Manager, we will automatically create a derived column for you to make sure your schema is compatible in Pinot. And finally, we make sure the schema is valid before proceeding and the rest of the dataset creation process. Another benefit of using Data Manager is being able to preview what your Pinot data looks like before even ingesting anything into Pinot. This is very helpful if you want to use a transform function and see how your data is going to look before locking in your table config or locking in your schema. So in this example, we show the JSON path string function to extract a property from a column containing a JSON string. As you can see here, this preview shows that we were able to successfully extract the state value from the column containing JSON formatted data. For data preview, we have different methods of sampling data from the source. So for example, for S3, we will pick a valid file from the specified bucket, and then we'll decode a handful of rows. Then we apply the transform function on top of these rows, the same way it is transformed in Pinot. Being able to iterate and visualize this within Data Manager is how you can ingest data within a few minutes, resulting in a huge gain of developer productivity. Data Manager makes it easy to configure your Pinot table to ingest from various data sources. These include batch, streaming, SQL, and coming soon, we will have Write API, which will provide the ability to insert records directly into Pinot using an API. Data Manager makes it simple to ingest files from your cloud storage into Pinot. For this example, we have S3. For batch ingestion, we configure the file ingestion task, which is executed using the Pinot minion framework. This is the Pinot component that is used for offloading any computationally expensive tasks. So as you can see here in this table config snippet, we have how you would configure a file ingestion task without using Data Manager. You can see we have the execution schedule, the input format, the input directory, as well as credentials. But with using Data Manager's UI, we ensure that your table is configured correctly without you having to manually define any task properties. You can even test your connection with the data source before proceeding. In addition to scheduling the ingestion task, Data Manager will kick off ingestion so you can start seeing data in Pinot within a few moments. Data Manager makes it simple to ingest from your stream sources, like Kafka or Kinesis. In this example, you can see that this configuration is even more daunting than the last one. By using Data Manager, we will only ask for a subset of these properties, and the rest will be inferred to get you up and running fast. It also supports connecting to your schema registry, and you can also configure additional properties and features like upsert for your Pinot table. Data Manager can also help you configure ingestion from your data warehouses with JDBC support, like Snowflake and BigQuery. Similar to batch ingestion, it is configured through a Pinot minion task. SQL ingestion is a little different in that it leverages a user-defined SQL to incrementally ingest data based on a time column. So once again, instead of manually defining the task configuration within your Pinot table config, the UI will guide you in defining your SQL and specifying your time column. You then select a start time for which to start ingesting records, and the minion task will incrementally ingest records up to the current day. Once scheduled, you'll have continuous ingestion into Pinot, and it should be in sync with your data warehouse as data is added over time. Finally, in Data Manager, you can easily spot if there's anything wrong with your data ingestion. So you can see here, the green circles indicate that ingestion is occurring as expected, but the red circle is an indication that something could be wrong. So you can click on the data set to drill down into the error details. As you can see, we include a stack trace to help give a clue into what is happening. This is super useful because sometimes it can take some manual work to debug and find ingestion-related errors within Pinot. Now, I'll hand it off to Oren to demo a more detailed overview of Data Manager in action.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Now I'm going to go back through the same process I showed you before, but this time I'm going to ingest a SQL dataset. So now we're choosing our SQL data source, Snowflake this time for our example. We already have a predefined Snowflake connection, so I don't have to go through all passwords and all the other properties there. We have a predefined authentication. And here, instead of picking a topic, we have our predefined list of tables in your SQL connection, but we also give you the option to use a SQL query. So right now I'm going to run a predefined query we have. Now SQL requires a little bit extra information for to locate your data. So we're going to give it a time column and give it a start time to give it a range to pull our information from. So this is an epoch millis format. Once we've entered all that information, we've automatically inferred our schema here. So I'm going to show you, this is now our inferred generated schema by Pinot. And this is the preview of the data we expect once we start ingesting. So once you've created your schema, you're happy with those changes, we now are inferring our table config. So on this screen, we have a few options for our data config. I'm going to change our retention here to 100 days. And I'm also going to add a special feature that Pinot offers called a StarTree index. It's helpful with our latency and storage optimization later on in the ingestion process. So I've set that up. And here I'll show you in the table config, we've changed our value to 100 days, and we've also added the StarTree index. Just to show you that all of these things can be added manually if you know what you're doing in our advanced editor, but otherwise we surface most of these things for you on the UI to make it easy. So these are all the details of the data that we're going to ingest, and one last look at the preview before we hit submit. And right there, we've created our first SQL table, and I'm ready. I'll start showing you the streaming data source with Kafka. All right, back through the same process this time with Kafka. So let's give it a new name. All right, we're on our data source step. So this time we're going to choose a streaming data source, Kafka being one of those options. We chose our predefined demo. This one has a couple different authentication types, and as Tim pointed out, we give you the ability to use a schema registry. So now we have the ability to pick the topics from that data source and also that format. So once we have that information, we've inferred our schema. Now, as Tim brought up before, we have this feature called derived columns, used sometimes for things like spaces. But this time, I want to format a time column that I have that's currently in epoch millis format, but I want this to be easily readable. So we're going to use ISO datetime, I think. So yeah, we'll use our datetime helper function here. Choose the column that I want to convert, which is the merge time in millis. And I'll give it this format with the year, the month, and the day. We hit apply. We get validation. Let's see, I'm going to search this table because it's a lot of columns. There, and we've added our additional, known as a derived column. And I can show you here in our schema, we've added a mapping down here. So you can add this manually, but we make it very easy to do through the UI. And then here in your preview, we show you that here's your original column next to the new derived column with the properly formatted data. Now with streaming data sources, you have the ability to add an upsert. So here in this step, we're going to choose our primary key. This is going to help us later on. So now we've inferred our config. This time our options are a little different because we have a streaming data set and each data source has slightly different options. But same thing, once we change things on the UI end of things, here in our table config, that will be updated as well, and you may also make any additional changes within this JSON. Let me hit next. All right. So finally, we're again on the review and submit step. We have an additional preview here just in case you wanted to double check that your data is going to be formatted properly. We still see our derived column here. I'm going to hit submit, and we've now created our streaming data set. Now here, I'll show you immediately because streaming data should be ingesting as soon as we have added the data set. Here, demo Kafka data set. Yep. And so you'll see Pinot is already seeing our data, and Pinot also has picked up on our derived column. So we have our newly formatted information as well as the original data. All right, so that should be it for our demo. I'm going to invite Tim back out, and we'll close this up.
Thanks, Oren. There's a lot of other features not covered in this talk, so we encourage you to check out StarTree's Data Manager.
And many more features to come in the future. So thank you for coming to listen to us, and please enjoy using Data Manager.
Thank you.